The Caribbean coastline of Venezuela sleeps peacefully under the golden warmth of the morning sun. Suddenly, the ocean behaves strangely as millions of tons of water vanish from the shore. A dark shadow rises on the distant horizon, blocking the sunlight and swallowing the blue sky. This is not a cloud formation, but a wall of water taller than any skyscraper. Massive cargo ships are lifted like plastic toys and thrown violently against the concrete city. The unstoppable force of nature crashes into La Guaira with the power of a nuclear bomb. Reinforced concrete structures crumble instantly under the immense pressure of the crushing ocean waves. The water climbs the slopes of Mount Avila, chasing everything that attempts to escape its wrath. The international airport is erased from the map as airplanes are swept away like dry leaves. Thousands of people watch in frozen horror as their familiar world is annihilated in seconds. From space, the northern coast of South America disappears under a terrifying blanket of white foam. The underwater currents tear apart the foundations of the city, dragging entire neighborhoods into the abyss. The wave does not stop at the coast, but pushes deep into the valleys with fury. We always believed the mountains would protect us from the fury of the open sea. Today we witness a scenario that science predicts could happen at any moment without warning. A 500-meter mega tsunami is the ultimate nightmare for any coastal civilization on Earth. There is no high ground safe enough when the ocean decides to reclaim the land. The deafening roar of the ocean silences all human cries and mechanical sounds of the city. Darkness falls at noon as the massive curtain of water shuts out the tropical sun. Welcome to the most terrifying simulation of a natural disaster ever created for the region. 2 hours before the disaster strikes, the capital city of Caracas moves to its familiar daily bustling rhythm under Mount Avila. On the coast of La Guaira, thousands of tourists carelessly enjoy the warm, clear waters of the beautiful Caribbean Sea. Deep inside the Seismological Research Institute, the recording needles begin to sketch frantic lines signaling danger. Hundreds of miles offshore on the ocean floor, a massive mountainside silently slides into the dark black abyss. Suddenly, the sea level begins to recede abnormally fast, revealing dry, dead coral reefs and wet sand. Flocks of seagulls sense the pressure change and scatter frantically towards the mainland to find shelter. Instead of fleeing, curious locals walk out onto the newly exposed land to film this strange phenomenon. On the distant horizon, a white band begins to form, looking like a giant storm cloud descending on the sea. The civil defense warning sirens wail belatedly, tearing through the peaceful atmosphere of the tropical noon. Smiles vanish from faces as they realize the wall of water is rushing in at the speed of a jet plane. The massive wall of water stands vertically like a moving mountain, officially completely blocking out the sun at the La Guaira coast. The moment of first impact creates an explosion of white foam, a roaring sound tearing through eardrums. Giant cranes at the container port are bent by the water flow like soft candy bars. Thousands of colorful containers are swept away, floating and crashing into each other, creating a chaotic sound. A massive oil tanker is lifted high by the wave and thrown straight into the coastal residential area. Seawater floods into Maiquetía Airport, turning the international runway into a raging river of death. A parked Boeing 747 is tossed by the current, spinning and crashing into the passenger terminal. The sea-crossing bridge connecting the airport and the capital begins to shake violently before the pillars crumble. A massive section of the bridge collapses, dragging dozens of cars in freefall into the dark floodwaters. The waves do not stop. They continue into the city center, weaving through the high-rise buildings. The ground floors of apartment buildings are breached by water pressure, glass shattering like fireworks. A glass office tower tilts and slowly collapses into the adjacent building. The dark water sweeps away everything in its path: signs, trees, buses, and small kiosks. The tsunami begins to climb the slopes of Mount Avila, turning winding mountain roads into deadly waterfalls. Slum houses clinging to the mountainside slide down into the rising waters. The electrical system explodes consecutively, creating eerie blue sparks amidst the dark water. Inside a fifth-floor apartment, water begins to rise through the windows, furniture floating in the living room. A statue of a historical figure in the central square is decapitated by the waves and sinks into the flood. Cars are compressed together in narrow alleys, forming massive dams of debris. The water surface bubbles with toxic fumes from spilled gasoline, creating deadly rainbow streaks. An ancient church bell tower tries to stand firm amidst the rapids, but eventually collapses. From an underwater perspective, the city looks like a sunken graveyard with car wrecks and signs floating. The water pressure causes manhole covers to blow off, creating geysers from the ground. At a coastal hospital, water floods the main lobby, overturning stretchers and medical equipment. A luxury yacht is washed by the waves all the way into the city's football stadium. The highest crest of the wave begins to break, crashing down on the entire downtown area with crushing weight. Coastal coconut trees are uprooted, hurling like spears in the swirling water. Corrugated iron roofs of small houses are torn off by wind and water, flying in the air like sheets of paper. A multi-story parking garage collapses floor by floor like a domino effect under the weight of water. The entire bustling flea market disappears in an instant, leaving only a vast expanse of trash-filled water. Water breaches the walls of the local prison, creating horrific chaos inside. A fire truck with flashing lights is swept away, lights still blinking underwater. The wave hits a vertical cliff face, creating a rebound water column hundreds of meters high. Neon advertising signs flicker one last time before exploding and falling into the water. The rapid current creates massive whirlpools, sucking everything down into underground drains. A pack of stray dogs desperately swims towards floating roofs but is swept away by the current. Muddy water spills into a road tunnel, turning it into a completely flooded death trap. Steel pedestrian bridges are twisted into grotesque shapes under the water's force. In the industrial zone, chemical storage tanks rupture, dyeing the water weird shades of green and yellow. A subway train car is pushed, floating to the surface from a breached station. Shards of glass and metal fly through the air like a lethal rain. An old library building has its walls washed away, revealing thousands of books floating. Waves crash into each other from multiple directions due to reflection from mountains, creating flow chaos. A double-decker bus is flipped upside down, drifting through a flooded intersection. Large billboard panels are torn loose by the wind, flying like giant kites. An entire coastal mangrove forest is wiped out, leaving only a bare mudflat. Debris from the city begins to drift offshore, forming a massive garbage patch on the sea. Rain begins to pour down torrentially, mixing with seawater to add to the bleakness of the scene. A telecommunication tower on a hilltop is pulled down by a landslide, cables snapping wildly. The light from the old lighthouse goes out forever as the tower is swallowed by the wave. Chemical containers explode, forming toxic orange smoke clouds rising into the sky. Water begins to intrude into the deepest subway tunnels, turning them into giant water pipes. A grand piano floats in the middle of the water, evoking the tragedy of buried art. Waterlogged concrete buildings begin to peel and crack on the surface. The water carries red mud down from the mountains, dyeing a region of the blue sea red. Heavy trucks are flipped onto their backs, wheels spinning in the air. A shark is swept inland by the wave, swimming through a flooded street intersection. A children's playground with slides and swings is twisted and sinks into the mud. Skyscraper glass panels reflect the destruction below before shattering. The whole city is now a chaotic lake, with no distinction between roads and rivers. 1 hour after impact, the water level begins to stagnate but does not recede, turning the city into a giant swamp. The city's drainage system has been completely destroyed, causing dirty water to stagnate and stink. The main substations submerged in salt water begin to explode for the last time before dying completely. Darkness spreads rapidly across the capital Caracas as the national power grid officially shuts down completely. Inside hospitals, ventilators, and life support equipment go silent, leaving only faint flashlight beams. The telecommunication system is paralyzed. Millions of phones become useless bricks with no signal. Cell towers on high mountains are pulled down by landslides, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Thousands of cars are trapped on elevated highways, unable to move or turn back. Panic begins to spread as people realize they are completely isolated on concrete islands. Out-of-control crowds begin to abandon their vehicles and run on foot towards higher ground. An ambulance is blocked by the crowd because there is no way left to move. The winding roads around Mount Avila begin to collapse due to heavy rain and aftershocks. A massive mud flow from the mountain crashes down, burying houses that luckily escaped the tsunami. Mountain tunnels are sealed by rocks and soil, turning into traps with no exit. In the city center, although the water level has stopped rising, the undercurrent is still extremely dangerous. Survivors climb onto the roofs of bus stops and trees to avoid the polluted water. Fresh water sources are contaminated with salt and heavy pollution, pushing humans into burning thirst. Supermarkets and convenience stores have their doors breached by water, goods floating everywhere. Crowds begin to wade through water to salvage floating bottles of clean water and canned food. A man hugging his dog tightly, sitting shivering on a floating piece of concrete wall. The crying of children echoes between the hollow buildings, creating a haunting sound. Fires begin to break out from ruptured gas pipelines, fire burning on the water surface. Black smoke from the fires billows up, mixing with dark clouds to form black rain. Rescue forces look helplessly at the city from above because there is no safe place to land. Roads leading to the hospital are all cut off by massive sinkholes. Citizens begin to organize their own rescue, using wooden planks as rafts to move. A woman uses her phone flashlight to signal SOS towards the gray sky. Car wrecks piled on top of each other block the entrance to safe neighborhoods. Flocks of wild birds perch densely on remaining power lines, silently observing the disaster. The water begins to recede very slowly, leaving a meter-thick layer of sludge covering everything. A child's shoe lies lonely on a pile of mud, a haunting image of loss. High-rise office buildings become dark lighthouses, filled with refugees inside. The smell of gasoline and gas is strong in the air, the risk of explosion lurking everywhere. A group of people trying to break down the door of a pharmacy to find bandages and antibiotics. Rainwater mixed with ash from fires creates black streaks running down survivors' faces. The subway system turns into giant underground reservoirs, drowning all hope of movement. A rescue helicopter tries to drop a line to a building, but the wind is too strong. Ships stranded on the streets begin to tilt as the water recedes. People use flashlights to create rivers of light, moving to high ground in the dark. Fatigue is evident on the faces of firefighters when they can do nothing more. A torn Venezuelan flag covered in mud still flies on a leaning flagpole. Army armored vehicles try to enter the city but get stuck in the mud. The siren of a police car sounds faint and hopeless from afar. The dawn of the next day brings no hope, only brutally exposing the corpse of a once thriving metropolis. A thick layer of mud covers everything like a giant shroud, turning skyscrapers into silent tombstones. No more car horns or music. The only sound remaining is the wind whistling through shattered window frames. Survivors walk aimlessly among the ruins, searching for loved ones in vain under the harsh, glaring sun. Crumbled bridges and vanished roads are proof of just how fragile our civilization truly is. The sea has retreated, but it has left a permanent scar on the face of beautiful Venezuela. However, amidst absolute destruction, the spark of life and human will begins to rekindle from the ashes. We never truly conquer nature. We are merely living by its temporary tolerance and mercy. This is just a hypothetical scenario, but geological history proves that it can absolutely happen again. Cherish every peaceful moment, for tomorrow is never a promise kept by the universe.